Okay, well today we're going to have a look at developing black and white film, how to develop it by hand. It's quite an outdated technique you might think, but still quite fun to do, still used quite a lot. Okay, so we're going to start by preparing the developing tank, that's stage one. I'll put up a list of all the bits and pieces that you need, all the equipment as well. Okay, so we're going to start with our developing reels, which are also sometimes called spirals. These are plastic ones, you can get metal ones as well, but most of them are plastic. You can see they're two halves, they just clip together. Now most of the time with these tanks you'll be doing two rolls of film. So we've got two spirals, so we'll just clip the second one together. There we go, so there's our two spirals. And this is the centre, we'll call it the spindle, not quite sure what it is called, but it's we'll call it the spindle. And you can see the two rolls just slot onto that holds them together. So there we go, that's that prepared. And then we've got the developing tank. Okay, so this is the developing tank. And then you can see that just drops in. Nice and straightforward. And then you just screw on the lid. This is an older style tank with a screw on lid. So you just need to screw the lid on. The newer ones have a click on lid, that's a lot easier. This one's a screw on lid. Okay, so there we go, there's the tank all developed. All prepared. Okay, so we're going to go to stage 2. We're going to load the film into the tank. Okay, so loading the film, obviously you're going to have some film, and you're also going to need one of these. This is a changing bag that you can see there. Completely dark sealed bag. There's a double layer in there with two zips that hold it shut. We'll see that in a moment. There we go, you can see. Drop everything inside. So first of all we've dismantled the tank and putting all the bits in separately. So the two spirals go in separately. And then you've got the tank and the lid, and then you've got the film. Got the two film cartridges. There's the cartridge. Okay, so just drop that in. See, in this case, these are bulk load film cartridges, so they're a lot easier to disassemble. We'll talk you through that in a sec. Okay, so there's two zips here. There's one fiddly one inside, which is that one. And then we've got another one on the outside, and there we go. So that's completely light safe now. It's important that this process is done in complete pitch darkness. If there's any light at all, it will ruin the film. That's why we're using the changing bag. Okay, so now we've got to load the film onto the rolls and onto the reels. The only problem we've got, of course, is that you can't see what I'm doing because it's inside the bag. So what we've got to get around that, just so you can see what we're actually doing inside that bag. Got another little bit here. Okay, I'm going to show you what to do without the bag. Okay, so first of all, when you're inside the bag, you take apart the cartridge. This is a bulk load cartridge, so it comes apart quite easily. And take out the film. Take out the spindle in the middle of the film. Okay, and there we go, there's the end of the film. And then you need the spiral, or the reel. And you can see the two little plastic lugs, the two little triangular plastic lugs. You just need to slide the film underneath those lugs. And you'll see inside there's two little ball bearings, and it operates as a ratchet. So you literally just do that. You just move the top half of it backwards and forwards, and it literally will ratchet the film into the reel. And it goes around in a spiral. Okay, so there we go, we've got to the end. Just take off the centre part of the cartridge, just wind the last little bit on. Make sure it's completely on the reel. And there you go, so that's fully loaded. Okay, and then we bring in the tank. Again, I will stress all of this happens inside the changing bag, completely in the dark. Never do it in the light because it will ruin the film. So you have to do all of this inside the bag. Okay, so pop it inside the tank and screw the lid on. Make sure it's on correctly. Now that can be fiddly with these screw-on ones inside the bag. Okay, there we go, so it's fully loaded. Okay, so there we are. That's just finishing off that process inside the bag. See those two little armholes there? They've got elastic around them so that they seal in. And then you take the undo the two zips, and then take everything out. So there's the loaded tank. So the two film spirals, two film reels are now inside that tank. And then here's the remnants of the two cartridges. As I've mentioned, these are bulk load cartridges from bulk loaded films. So what I do is I load the film on myself onto these cartridges from a large bulk loader, bulk roll of film, rather than buying individual cartridges. So I can reuse these, so we'll just reassemble them, and I can pop those back in my stock to reuse them. If you're using a standard film cartridge, that can be a bit fiddly to prise the end off, so I'd probably recommend using a retriever to pull the film leader back out of the cartridge and do it that way. Unfortunately I haven't got one of those to show you. Okay, so now we're going on to stage 3, so we're going to mix the chemicals. Okay, start with the fixer. I'll do the fixer first just so I've got it ready. Okay, I use Amfix, which is from Champion Photochemicals, works quite well for me and it's quite cheap. Obviously for hobby use you don't need to worry quite so much. That's well out of its use by date, by the way, but it still works. Okay, so you need to dilute this down with water. You don't use it neat out of the bottle. You dilute it down. You dilute it down 1 part fixer to 4 parts water. I can never quite remember the numbers though, so I always have to sit and work it out. What the fixer does is it fixes the image, the emulsion layer, onto the film after you've developed it. So you develop it first, then you put the fixer in, and that fixes the image onto the film. Makes everything nice and stable. Okay, so the jug obviously has got indications on it for millilitres, which is what I'm working in. I'm making up 600 millilitres of solution here, which is enough for 2 films. So we pour in the fixer and then we top that up with water. That water is at 20 degrees centigrade. That's quite important. The temperature does affect it, so it's important it's at 20 degrees, and I have used a thermometer to check that. Okay, so I'm just going to pour it into the measuring cylinder. And just in case you're wondering why I didn't use the measuring cylinder in the first place, it's because it's not quite big enough. It only goes up to 500 ml. We need 600. It'll just about hold 600, but the graduations only go up to 500. That's why I've measured it out separately. Okay, so there's the fixer all prepared. So now we'll go on to the developer. Okay, now this is the one you use first. I'll use Promacrol, which is also from Champion Photochemicals. Works well for me. This film developer, it's quite an old bottle, this one. Again, it's well past its sell by date, but it still works. For hobby use it's absolutely fine. You wouldn't want to use it for anything professional. Okay, now unfortunately I forgot I was filming at this point and got my head in the way, but what I'm doing is using a small measuring cylinder to very precisely measure out the exact quantity of the developer. The developer is quite critical that you get it absolutely right, so I'm using quite an accurate measuring cylinder here. And again, I'm making up 600 ml of solution, so I need, in this particular case, the way that this chemical works, I need 40 millilitres of the developer and then the rest is water. So I have to measure it twice because it only goes up to 20. Okay, so there we go. So that's 40 millilitres of the developer. I'd also recommend washing your hands if you get any on your hands, which I did do after I'd finished this, by the way. And if you get it up to 600 millilitres, again this is 20 degrees centigrade, and again that is quite important, so I have used a thermometer to check that. And there we go. So that's our solutions. So we're going to start now at stage 4, which is developing the film. This is actually the fun bit. There's our developing tank. Inside the tank are the 2 rolls of film. And we're going to pour in the developer, which is the first of the 2 solutions. Okay, that's the first one we're going to pop in. So we'll pour that in. Now it's important, the timing is absolutely critical on this one, so I've got my phone there as a stopwatch. Start the stopwatch as soon as you start pouring the liquid in. And you have to agitate it again. As soon as you put it in, you need to agitate it. So that's basically how I do that. Just literally tip the tank backwards and forwards for about 10 seconds. Now, you have to do that every minute, on the minute, for the whole duration of the developer. In this particular case, it's for this particular film and this particular developer, that's 13 minutes. So it's going to take 13 minutes to develop, and you have to invert it like that for about 10 seconds backwards and forwards on the minute, every minute. Obviously that's a bit time consuming. I'm sure you don't want to sit here watching that happen for 13 minutes. Again, keep an eye on the clock, and on the minute, every minute, you need to agitate it, which basically means inverting it back right way, invert back right way, and do that for about 10 seconds. So, by the magic of editing, we're going to speed through the rest of the 13 minutes. Basically the same thing going on, just inverting it every minute, on the minute. what this basically does is it just mixes all the chemicals up, just makes sure that they stay in proper contact with the film, and that you don't end up with sort of dull chemicals, if you like, chemicals that have already reacted with the film sitting next to it and not really doing anything properly. So it just basically just mixes it up, keeps it all fresh, makes sure everything develops nice and evenly. That's why you have to do it. It's important that you do it. We have trialled it without doing it, and believe me, it doesn't work. So make sure that you make sure you do it. Okay, now again, timing is critical. So when you get to, in this case, 13 minutes, and that does vary from developer to developer and from film to film. So it's not always 13 minutes. It's quite critical. Exactly on 13 minutes, you need to pour out the developer fairly quickly. I'm using a bucket because I haven't got a sink to hand. Okay, so we tip out the developer, and then we need to stop it. Now, you can get proper stop baths for this, which is basically almost like a citric acid type thing, which just neutralises the developer. I've always just used water, and it works for me. I've never had a problem doing that, and that's actually how I was taught by a cash-strapped photographer who didn't have the money to buy stop baths. So, and again, what I do is I will invert that continually for 30 seconds, just about 3/4 full of water, and just continually invert it for about 30 seconds. And that's how we wash that down. That basically just washes away all the chemical from the film surface, just gets rid of it, stops the process from happening. So we'll just agitate that away. Okay, then tip that out. Again, just pour that into the bucket, get rid of it. Okay, now, when we've done that, ready to move on to the next phase, which is fixing and washing. Okay, so this is where the fixer that we mixed up earlier comes in. Once we've pulled out that stop, again, this is on the clock. Not quite so critical time-wise, this one, but start the stopwatch anyway, as soon as you pour the liquid in. So pour in all that fixer. And this one you need to do for 5 minutes, and it's exactly the same process. You have to agitate it on the minute, every minute, exactly the same, exactly like that. On the minute, every minute. So you do it as soon as you pour the chemical in, and then every minute on the minute. This one we only need to do for 5 minutes, which is where we are now. Okay, now you'll notice that I've now got a bottle and a jug. Okay, so we've been doing this for about 4 minutes. We've just cut a bit out there. I've got a bottle and I've got a funnel. The fixer, unlike the developer, you can reuse. So I'm not going to pour that into the bucket. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pour that into the bottle, and I'll use that again for the next couple of films that I do. I tend to reuse that, about half a dozen times maybe, so for about a dozen rolls of film. Okay, so we can pour that into the bottle, and then we'll get rid of that. And then we start the washing process. Now, this is where I tend to differ a little bit from the convention. The way that they teach you to do that, or the documents tell you to do it, is an adapter that plugs into the top of the developing tank that you connect to a tap, and that forces water into the tank, circulates it around, and then comes out through the overflow in the top of the developing tank. Now, I haven't got one of those, and I also don't have easy access to a sink, so I don't do it like that. But this is how I was always taught to do it, again by somebody else who didn't have that kit. And it's always worked for me. I've never had a problem with it. But basically the way I do it is I will do it exactly as you see here. About 3/4 full of water. It's just ordinary water. Agitate it continuously for 30 seconds. And then pour it away. And then just repeat that process. And I repeat that about 6 times. I originally was taught to do that about 3 times. I do it 6 just to be on the absolute safe side. But 5 or 6 times is how many other times I do it. I've never had a problem with using this process. Some people will probably sort of say that it won't work, but it works for me. I've never had a problem with it. I've got films which I did years ago which are still okay, and the films don't smell of chemicals when you take them out, so it works for me. One thing you will notice, these tanks have a tendency to leak, as you can probably see, particularly with the water at the end. The screw-type tanks do tend to leak because they have a tendency to crack when you do up the screws, so when you screw the lid on it cracks. Okay, now one last little ingredient which I always put in with the last wash the last wash cycle is washing up liquid. Literally just a drop, one drop, that's it, no more than that. And what that does is that acts as what's called a wetting agent. Now, again, you can get proper wetting agents, and that's technically what you should use, and they probably do a better job, but again, it's money and whatever, so I use washing up liquid. One drop of washing up liquid, it works. What that does is it stops drying marks appearing on the film. So when you wash it, you hang it up to dry, putting that wetting agent in there, putting that drop of washing up liquid in, just stops all of the drying marks from forming on the surface of the film. Works for me. I've always done it that way. Okay, so tip that out. Okay, so that's it. We're done. So it's the moment of truth. This is where you finally get to see your film and you finally get to see your photos. So this is the first point in the process where you can actually open the tank in the light. Inside you can see we've got the reels. Developing's now finished, it's not light sensitive anymore, so we can take it out. We've got 2 rolls of film in there. So you just undo the reel in exactly the same way as we put it together earlier on. Just makes taking the film out a bit easier. Try not to touch the surface of the film too much, if you can avoid it. It's almost impossible not to, but just try not to. And it's a bit hard to see here. I've got the bucket on the floor just out of camera shot. Just running my fingers down to get rid of the excess water. Again, you can get a proper film squeegee that does that, but that again works for me. Just be careful not to drag anything down and scratch the film, and just do it a couple of times, but it works for me. It's not how you're meant to do it, but hey. And there you go, one completely developed film. You just go and hang that up to dry, and there you are. That's all there is to it. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you find it useful, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.